The first indication that something was wrong came not with a bang, but with a whisper of static. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the window of the Global Communication Research Center in Buenos Aires, her fingers tracing the edge of a tablet that had gone suddenly and completely dark. Outside, the city's intricate network of smart infrastructure began to falter. Traffic lights flickered, then died. The electric buses ground to a halt in the middle of busy streets. Overhead, the complex mesh of communication satellites that had been humanity's eyes and ears across the planet started to blink out one by one. "It's happening," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the rising confusion outside. 12 hours earlier, Elena had been part of an emergency global conference. Top researchers, military strategists, and government officials from every continent had gathered in a secure virtual space, sharing increasingly alarming intelligence. The Kraxan Collective, a technological civilization that had been silently observing Earth for decades, had finally made their move. Intercepted communication suggested a total technological dissolution. Not an invasion, not a traditional attack, but something far more insidious. A complete technological shutdown that would render human civilization helpless. Elena's team had been preparing for this possibility, not out of fear, but out of a deep-seated understanding that preparation was humanity's greatest strength. As the electromagnetic pulse spread across the globe, she activated the first phase of their contingency plan. In a basement laboratory 3 floors below, a group of young researchers and technologists began their work. Alejandro Gomes, a 28-year-old network engineer, was already pulling out modified communication devices they had been developing in secret. These weren't standard radios or communication tools, but hybrid systems designed to work when everything else failed. "Power grid is down," called out Maria Chen, a data systems specialist whose fingers flew across a manual keyboard. "But we've got backup systems online." The room was a controlled chaos of activity. Each person knew their role, each movement calculated and precise. They weren't just responding to a crisis. They were beginning to fight back. Outside, the world was changing. In small towns and massive cities, people began to adapt with a speed that would have surprised the Kraxan. A group of high school students in Tokyo used bicycle-powered generators to keep a local communication hub running. In rural Kenya, community radio operators pulled out solar-powered transmitters, creating localized information networks. In the Canadian wilderness, a network of research stations began linking their independent communication systems. Elena watched a small monitoring screen that still functioned, a prototype they had developed specifically to withstand extreme electromagnetic interference. The data flowing through was fragmentary but promising. Humanity wasn't just surviving, it was responding. "They thought we were dependent," she said to no one in particular, a slight smile crossing her face. "They thought our technology was a weakness." Alejandro approached, carrying a device that looked like a cross between a radio, a computer, and something entirely new. "Our adaptive network is starting to take shape," he reported. "We're creating communication paths the Kraxan won't understand." The device in his hands represented years of secret research. Unlike traditional communication systems that relied on fixed infrastructure, this was a living, adaptive network. It could create its own pathways, learn from interference, and rebuild itself faster than any system the Kraxan had encountered. What the alien collective didn't realize was that human technology was more than just machines and circuits. It was an expression of human creativity, resilience, and an unbreakable spirit of innovation. In cities and remote locations, in research centers and community halls, people were already moving, sharing resources, creating new solutions. The Kraxan had attempted to create isolation, but they had instead sparked the most remarkable display of human collaboration in history. Elena looked out the window again. The street below was transforming. People were helping each other, sharing information, creating improvised communication points. Battery-powered devices were being passed between strangers. Solar chargers were being set up on rooftops and in public spaces. This wasn't just survival. This was the beginning of something extraordinary. They have no idea, Elena whispered, watching the first waves of human adaptation spread across the city. They have absolutely no idea what they've started. The underground research facility hummed with a different kind of energy. Buried beneath the Buenos Aires Communication Research Center, it was a labyrinth of modified workstations, improvised communication nodes, and an atmosphere of determined creativity. Kai Chen adjusted his makeshift headset, a complex array of salvaged components that looked more like an electronic sculpture than a communication device. At 19, he was the youngest member of the research team, but nobody would have guessed it from the intensity of his focus. "We're not just rebuilding," Kai explained to Maria Chen, who was monitoring a wall of screens. "We're reimagining how technology can work." Their team represented a global collaboration that had been years in the making. Researchers from every continent had been secretly developing adaptive technologies, anticipating a moment like this. The Kraxan attack had been their ultimate stress test, and humanity was about to show its true potential. Maria pointed to a screen showing a complex network diagram. "Look at how the communication pathways are forming," she said. The display showed multiple interconnected nodes, constantly shifting and rebuilding themselves. It was nothing like traditional communication networks. This was alive. Alejandro approached with a thermos of coffee, his eyes bright with excitement. "The distributed network is showing capabilities we never anticipated," he said. "Each disconnected device is becoming a potential communication point. It's like the entire planet is learning to communicate in a completely new way." The facility was a controlled chaos of innovation. In one corner, a team of electrical engineers worked on modifying solar panels to create more resilient power sources. Another group focused on developing encryption methods that could slip through the Kraxan's technological barriers. A wall-sized board was covered with diagrams, theories, and increasingly complex algorithms. Kay's breakthrough had come from an unexpected place. During the initial hours of the attack, he had been studying the way neural networks in the human brain adapted to damage. What if communication technology could work the same way? Instead of having fixed pathways, what if the network could constantly rebuild itself, learn from interruptions, and create new routes of communication? "It's organic technology," Kai explained, showing a holographic representation of his network model. Not just a system, but a living, breathing communication organism. The model on the screen looked like a complex, ever-changing web. Nodes would appear, connect, disconnect, and reform in milliseconds. Where traditional networks would collapse, this system would adapt, learn, and continue. Outside the underground facility, the world was changing. Communities were developing their own local communication strategies. In rural areas, people were creating mesh networks using modified radio equipment. Urban centers saw the emergence of community communication hubs, powered by solar arrays and bicycle generators. A message came through on one of the screens, a transmission from a research station in Antarctica. They had developed their own communication method using modified satellite equipment and local power sources. The message was simple but powerful. "We're still here. We're still connected." Elena Rodriguez watched the emerging network with a sense of pride and wonder. This wasn't just about surviving the Kraxan attack. This was about demonstrating humanity's most profound capability, the ability to transform challenge into opportunity. "They thought our technology was a weakness," she said to Alejandro. "But they're about to learn that our greatest strength is how we work together." The team worked in shifts, each person bringing their unique expertise. A retired telecommunications engineer worked alongside a high school robotics champion. A network security specialist collaborated with an experimental physicist. Geographical boundaries, professional hierarchies, all of these had dissolved in the face of a shared challenge. By midnight, their adaptive network had already achieved something remarkable. Small communication bubbles were forming across the globe. These weren't just transmission points. They were intelligent nodes that could learn, adapt, and protect themselves. Kai looked up from his workstation, a smile spreading across his face. "We're not just surviving," he said. "We're evolving." The Kraxan had intended to isolate humanity, to break their technological infrastructure. Instead, they had triggered something extraordinary. A global collaboration that transcended traditional understanding of technology. A network that was more than the sum of its parts. As the night progressed, the underground facility continued to buzz with activity. Each moment brought a new breakthrough, a new possibility. They weren't just fighting back. They were reimagining what technology could be. And the Kraxan had no idea what was coming. The first true breakthrough came on the third day after the Kraxan attack, in a moment that would later be called the adaptive emergence. Dr. Sophia Okonkwo watched the holographic display with a mixture of disbelief and exhilaration. What had started as Kai Chen's theoretical neural network model was now transforming into something entirely unexpected. The communication network they were developing was no longer just a system. It was becoming a living, thinking entity. "It's learning," she whispered to Elena Rodriguez, who stood beside her. "Not just adapting. Learning." The holographic representation pulsed with complex patterns of light. Each node represented a communication point, a smartphone, a radio transmitter, a modified satellite link. But these nodes were doing something unprecedented. They were communicating in ways that went beyond simple data transmission. They were analyzing, predicting, and creating new pathways of communication faster than any human or computer had ever achieved. In the underground facility, the atmosphere was electric. Researchers from diverse backgrounds watched in awe as the network demonstrated capabilities that seemed to defy conventional understanding of technology. "Look at how it's responding to interference," Alejandro said, pointing to a section of the display. Where a traditional network would collapse under the Kraxan's electromagnetic disruption, this network was creating alternative routes. More than that, it was learning from each interference attempt, building stronger, more resilient communication paths. Kai Chen, who had been awake for almost 72 hours, explained the breakthrough. "Traditional networks have fixed infrastructure," he said, his eyes bright with excitement. "Our network is different. It's more like a living organism. Each device isn't just a transmission point, it's a learning node." The implications were staggering. Imagine a communication system that could heal itself, that could predict and avoid potential disruptions, that could create communication pathways where none existed before. This wasn't just a technological advancement. It was a fundamental reimagining of how technology could work. Around the world, the effects were already becoming apparent. In remote villages in India, farmers were using modified devices that could create local communication networks using minimal power. In the Arctic research stations, scientists were maintaining complex research communications using adaptive technology that could work in extreme conditions. A message came through from a research team in Australia. They had discovered that the adaptive network could actually improve its own encryption methods. Each attempt to block or interfere with the communication made the network stronger, more intelligent. "It's like an immune system," Sophia explained. But for information, the global research team worked in a state of controlled excitement. This was more than a response to the Kraxan attack. This was a technological renaissance that would change everything. Elena Rodriguez understood the deeper significance. The Kraxan had attempted to isolate humanity, to cut off their technological lifelines. Instead, they had triggered an unprecedented leap in technological evolution. "We're not just surviving," she told the team. "We're demonstrating something fundamental about human innovation." By the fourth day, the adaptive network had achieved something remarkable. It could now predict potential communication disruptions before they happened. More than that, it could create alternative communication routes that the Kraxan couldn't anticipate or block. Kai showed a simulation of how the network operated. Imagine a spider's web, but one that could instantly rebuild itself when damaged. A communication pathway that could sense potential threats and reroute around them. A system that was more than the sum of its parts. "This isn't just technology," Kai said. "This is a new form of collective intelligence." The implications extended far beyond communication. Medical researchers were already discussing how similar adaptive systems could revolutionize healthcare. Environmental scientists saw potential for creating more responsive ecological monitoring networks. As night fell in the underground facility, the holographic display continued to pulse and change. Each moment brought a new discovery, a new possibility. The Kraxen had intended to destroy humanity's technological infrastructure. Instead, they had unleashed something far more powerful. A global brain was emerging. Adaptive, intelligent, unstoppable. And this was just the beginning. The first breach happened almost by accident. Sophia Okonkwo was analyzing the remnants of intercepted Kraxen communication signals when she noticed something extraordinary. Most researchers would have missed it. A microscopic pattern buried beneath layers of complex encryption. But Sophia saw beyond the obvious, her mind working like a decoder that understood languages before they were fully formed. "It's not just a code," she muttered, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface. "It's a language." The underground research facility fell silent as Sophia began to unravel what would become the most significant breakthrough in interspecies communication history. The Kraxen didn't just use technology. They communicated through it. Each transmission was a complex tapestry of information, context, and intention that went far beyond simple data exchange. Kai Chen brought her a steaming cup of coffee, watching as she worked. "What are you seeing?" he asked. Sophia pointed to the intricate holographic display. "The Kraxen communication network is alive," she explained. "It's not just a transmission system. It's a living ecosystem of information. Every signal carries multiple layers of meaning." What had begun as a defensive strategy was transforming into something far more powerful. The human team wasn't just trying to block Kraxen communications. They were learning to understand them, to speak their technological language. Alejandro Rodriguez, a cybersecurity expert, brought up a series of decoded fragments. "Look at how their communication adapts," he said. "It's like watching a conversation between living organisms, not machines." The team worked in shifts, each bringing their unique perspective. A linguist helped decode communication patterns. A quantum physicist analyzed the underlying structure of the signals. A neural network specialist examined how information flowed through the Kraxen system. Days turned into weeks of intense study. The research facility became a hub of unprecedented discovery. They weren't just fighting a technological attack. They were learning an entirely new way of understanding communication. "They thought our diversity was a weakness," Alina Rodriguez said during a strategy meeting. "But our ability to approach a problem from multiple angles, that's our greatest strength." The breakthrough came during a late-night session. Sophia discovered that the Kraxen communication network had inherent vulnerabilities. Not technological weaknesses, but conceptual blind spots that emerged from their rigid way of thinking. The Kraxen believed in absolute control. Their communication system was designed to be perfectly structured, with no room for unexpected variables. Humanity's chaotic, adaptive approach became their ultimate weapon. Kai developed a series of adaptive algorithms that could slip through the Kraxen communication barriers. These weren't traditional hacking tools. They were more like communication chameleons, able to blend in, learn, and transmit information in ways the Kraxen could never anticipate. "We're not breaking their system," Kai explained. "We're becoming part of it." Around the world, small teams of researchers began to replicate their approach. In a research station in Greenland, a team used the new adaptive algorithms to create local communication bubbles. In a university lab in Singapore, students developed tools that could navigate the complex Kraxen communication landscape. The most remarkable discovery came unexpectedly. The Kraxen communication network wasn't just a transmission system. It was a form of collective intelligence. By understanding their system, humans were learning entirely new ways of processing and sharing information. "It's like learning a new way of thinking," Sophia told Alina. "Not just a new language, but a new way of perceiving reality." As weeks passed, the human adaptive network grew more sophisticated. Each interaction with the Kraxen system provided new insights, Where the aliens saw a battle of technological superiority, humans saw an opportunity to learn, to grow, to understand. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. A team of anthropologists and communication specialists helped decode the deeper cultural context of Kraxan transmissions. They weren't just breaking the code. They were understanding an entire civilization's way of thinking. This is more than technological infiltration, Elena said during a global conference call. This is a bridge between two completely different ways of understanding existence. As the sun rose over the Buenos Aires research facility, the team looked at their latest breakthrough. They had done more than survive the Kraxan attack. They had transformed it into the greatest learning opportunity in human history. The Kraxan had no idea what was coming. The psychological warfare room looked nothing like a traditional command center. Instead of rigid military displays, the space buzzed with creativity, covered in holographic projections, whiteboards filled with complex diagrams, and screens showing intricate communication patterns. Dr. Amara Diallo stood at the center, her background in cultural psychology and communication theory, making her the perfect architect of their most audacious strategy yet. The team had discovered something profound about the Kraxan. Their technological superiority masked a fundamental weakness in adaptive thinking. They see information as a rigid structure. Amara explained to Elena Rodriguez, "We see it as a living, breathing ecosystem." The psychological research team was unlike any assembled before. Linguists worked alongside neuroscientists. Communication specialists collaborated with artists and game theorists. Their goal wasn't traditional warfare. It was to understand and ultimately outmaneuver the Kraxan's entire approach to communication and conflict. Kai Chen had developed a series of adaptive algorithms that could do more than transmit information. These were communication entities that could learn, adapt, and most importantly, understand context in ways the Kraxan had never imagined. "We're creating information that doesn't just communicate," Kai said, showing a complex holographic display. "We're creating information that thinks." The team's approach was revolutionary. Where the Kraxan expected straightforward communication channels, humans were creating multi-layered information systems that were part communication, part psychological puzzle, part artistic expression. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Maria Santos, a specialist in indigenous communication systems, recognized patterns in the Kraxan transmissions that reminded her of traditional storytelling methods used by isolated communities. "They have a hierarchical communication structure," Maria explained. "Information flows in very specific, predictable patterns. But that predictability is also their greatest vulnerability." The team began developing what they called adaptive narratives, communication strategies that could change their meaning and structure based on how they were received. These weren't simple messages, but complex information organisms that could evolve in real time. In the research facility, screens showed complex simulations. Each transmission was a carefully crafted piece of communication that could adapt, change, and respond in ways the Kraxan communication systems could never anticipate. "We're not just sending messages," Amara told the team during a strategy session. "We're creating living conversations." Around the world, small teams began to implement these new communication strategies. A group of anthropology students in Brazil developed transmission methods that incorporated elements of local storytelling traditions. A research team in Japan created communication algorithms inspired by the complex social interactions of their culture. The most remarkable development came from understanding the Kraxan's fundamental perception of information. They saw communication as a linear, controlled process. Humans saw it as a dynamic, creative expression. Elena Rodriguez watched the developing strategy with a sense of wonder. "They thought they could isolate us," she said. "Instead, they've given us the greatest opportunity to demonstrate human creativity." The psychological warfare team wasn't just developing communication strategies. They were creating a new understanding of how information could work. Each transmission became a multi-layered experience. Part message, part puzzle, part artistic expression. Kai's adaptive algorithms could now create communication pathways that were almost sentient. They could detect the Kraxen's communication patterns, understand their expectations, and then completely subvert those expectations. It's like jazz, Amara explained during a global conference call. We're improvising on their communication framework. Every time they expect a specific response, we give them something completely unexpected. The Kraxen had designed their communication systems to be perfectly controlled, with no room for spontaneity or creative interpretation. Humanity's approach was the exact opposite, embracing uncertainty, complexity, and creative potential. As weeks passed, the psychological warfare team's strategies began to show remarkable results. Kraxen communication networks became increasingly confused, their rigid systems unable to process the dynamic, adaptive human approach. In the research facility, the team celebrated each breakthrough. This was more than a technological conflict. This was a fundamental clash of understanding between a controlled hierarchical approach to information and a creative, adaptive, living approach. The sun set over Buenos Aires, casting long shadows through the research facility. On the screens, complex communication patterns danced and shifted, a testament to human creativity. The Kraxen had no idea what was coming. The turning point began with a single line of code. Dr. Sofia Okonkwo watched the holographic display with a mixture of anticipation and disbelief. What had started as a theoretical breakthrough was now transforming the entire technological landscape. The adaptive network they had developed was no longer just a communication system. It had become a living, thinking entity that could navigate and manipulate the Kraxen's most secure communication channels. "We're not just breaking through," Sofia whispered to Elena Rodriguez. "We're rewriting the entire concept of technological interaction." In the underground research facility, the atmosphere crackled with an electric sense of possibility. Researchers from every corner of the globe watched as their collaborative effort began to yield results that defied conventional understanding of technology, communication, and conflict. Kai Chen's adaptive algorithms had evolved into something far beyond their original design. Where the Kraxen expected rigid, predictable communication pathways, they now encountered a dynamic system that could think, learn, and transform in milliseconds. The first major breakthrough came unexpectedly. A small team of researchers discovered that they could not just intercept Kraxen communications, but could actually influence their technological infrastructure from within. It wasn't hacking in the traditional sense. It was more like a form of technological diplomacy, a way of speaking the Kraxen's own technological language. Alejandro Rodriguez pulled up a series of complex visualizations. "Look at how the network is moving," he said. The holographic display showed intricate pathways of information, weaving and shifting like a living organism. "We're not just defending, we're transforming." Around the world, the effects began to manifest. In research stations, community centers, and improvised communication hubs, people were witnessing something extraordinary. The adaptive network could now predict and prevent technological disruptions before they happened. More than that, it could create communication pathways that the Kraxen couldn't anticipate or block. Elena understood the deeper significance. The Kraxen had attempted to isolate humanity, to cut off their technological lifelines. Instead, they had triggered an unprecedented leap in technological evolution. "This is more than a response," she told the team during a global strategy session. "This is a fundamental reimagining of how technology can work." The most remarkable aspect was the collaborative nature of the breakthrough. Researchers from different disciplines brought unique perspectives. A neural network specialist worked alongside a quantum physicist. An anthropologist collaborated with a communication expert. Their diversity became their greatest strength. Sofia discovered that the Kraxen's communication network had inherent vulnerabilities, not technological weaknesses, but conceptual blind spots that emerged from their rigid way of thinking. They believed in absolute control, in perfectly structured systems, with no room for unexpected variables. Humanity's approach was exactly the opposite. Kai developed a series of adaptive algorithms that could do more than transmit information. These were communication entities that could learn, adapt, and understand context in ways the Kraxan had never imagined. "We're creating information that doesn't just communicate," Kai explained during a briefing. "We're creating information that thinks." The global research team worked with a sense of controlled excitement. Each breakthrough brought new possibilities. The adaptive network could now predict potential communication disruptions, create alternative communication routes, learn and improve its own encryption methods, understand and interpret complex communication contexts. A message came through from a research team in Australia. They had discovered that the network could actually improve its own capabilities with each interaction. Where the Kraxan saw a battle of technological superiority, humans saw an opportunity to learn, to grow, to understand. As night fell over the Buenos Aires research facility, the holographic displays continued to pulse and change. Each moment brought a new discovery, a new possibility. The Kraxan had intended to destroy humanity's technological infrastructure. Instead, they had unleashed something far more powerful. A global brain was emerging, adaptive, intelligent, unstoppable. Delina Rodriguez looked at her team, a smile spreading across her face. "They thought they could control us," she said. "They have no idea what we're capable of." The turning point had arrived, and this was just the beginning. The world transformed in ways no one could have predicted. What had begun as a defensive response to the Kraxan attack had become a global technological renaissance. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a global conference, her presentation revealing something far beyond a simple technological breakthrough. Humanity had not just survived, they had evolved. The adaptive network had become a living ecosystem of information, intelligence, and possibility. It wasn't just a communication system anymore. It was a collective intelligence that spanned the globe, connecting research centers, community groups, and individual innovators in ways that defied traditional understanding. Sofia Okonkwo demonstrated the network's capabilities through a series of holographic projections. Imagine a communication system that could predict global environmental changes, optimize resource distribution, create instant translation between any human language, develop medical solutions in real time, solve complex scientific problems through collective intelligence. "We're not just talking about communication," Sophia explained. "We're talking about a new form of collective human potential." Kai Chen, who had been instrumental in developing the adaptive algorithms, showed how the network could now learn and grow exponentially. Each interaction made it more intelligent, more responsive, more understanding. The rigid technological barriers that once separated disciplines, communities, and individuals were dissolving. In research centers around the world, scientists were discovering unprecedented opportunities. A medical research team in India could now collaborate instantly with colleagues in Brazil, sharing insights and developing solutions faster than ever before. Environmental researchers could track climate patterns with microscopic precision, creating predictive models that could save entire ecosystems. The most remarkable transformation happened at the human level. The adaptive network wasn't just a technological tool, it was becoming a platform for global understanding. Cultural barriers began to break down as people could communicate more deeply, more authentically than ever before. The Kraxan thought they could isolate us, Elena told the conference. Instead, they'd given us the greatest gift, the opportunity to truly connect. Around the world, the effects were profound. In small villages and massive cities, people were experiencing a new kind of connectivity. The network could now provide localized solutions to complex problems. A farming community in Africa could receive precise agricultural advice. A medical clinic in a remote mountain region could access specialist knowledge instantly. Alejandro Rodriguez demonstrated how the adaptive network could now create personalized learning experiences. Educational systems were being transformed, with each student receiving a completely unique, adaptive learning path that responded to their individual needs and potential. The technological transcendence went beyond communication. The adaptive network was now solving problems that had seemed impossible. Climate change mitigation strategies, resource distribution solutions, medical breakthroughs that could transform human health. We're not just changing technology, Kai explained during a global broadcast. We're changing what it means to be human. The Kraxan watched in increasing confusion. Their rigid, controlled approach to technology had been completely outmaneuvered. Humanity had demonstrated something fundamental, that true intelligence is not about control, but about adaptation, creativity, and collective potential. Sophia's team discovered that the network could now develop its own ethical frameworks. It wasn't just processing information, it was understanding context, developing nuanced responses that balanced technological efficiency with human compassion. Global challenges that had seemed insurmountable were now being addressed with unprecedented speed and creativity. Renewable energy solutions, agricultural innovations, medical breakthroughs, educational transformations. The conference hall was filled with representatives from every corner of the globe. Scientists, community leaders, educators, researchers, all witnessing a fundamental transformation of human potential. Elena Rodriguez looked out over the audience, understanding the profound moment they were experiencing. The Kraxan had attempted to destroy humanity's technological infrastructure. Instead, they had triggered a global awakening. "This is more than a technological breakthrough," she said. "This is a new chapter of human potential." As the presentation concluded, the holographic displays showed a living, breathing network of global connectivity. Each point of light represented a human connection, a potential for understanding, for growth, for transformation. The adaptive network pulsed with possibility. And this was just the beginning. The final confrontation was nothing like anyone had expected. The Kraxan delegation arrived expecting to find a defeated civilization. Instead, they encountered a transformed humanity that defied every preconception they had ever held about technological potential and collective intelligence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of the global communication hub, surrounded by a team that represented the most diverse collaboration in human history. Sofia Okonkwo, Kai Chen, Alejandro Rodriguez, each brought a unique perspective that would change the course of interstellar relations forever. The massive holographic display showed the intricate, living network that humanity had developed. It was more than a communication system. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of intelligence that connected every human research center, community, and innovative mind across the planet. "We're not here to fight," Elena began, her voice calm and clear. "We're here to demonstrate a fundamental truth about intelligence, about potential." The Kraxan representatives, rigid, structured beings who had built their entire civilization on the premise of absolute technological control, looked confused. Their communication systems, once considered the most advanced in the known galaxy, now seemed primitive compared to the adaptive network humanity had created. Kai Chen stepped forward, demonstrating how the network could instantaneously solve complex problems that would take the Kraxan months or years to address. Climate modeling, medical research, resource optimization. The network wasn't just processing information, it was understanding it, learning from it, transforming it. "Your attack was meant to isolate us," Sophia explained. "Instead, you've given us the greatest opportunity to demonstrate human potential." The holographic display shifted, showing how the adaptive network had transformed every aspect of human society. Education systems that could provide personalized learning experiences, medical technologies that could predict and prevent diseases, communication platforms that could bridge cultural divides in milliseconds. The Kraxan had a fundamental misunderstanding about technology. They saw it as a tool of control, of rigid structure. Humanity saw it as a living, breathing expression of collective potential. Alejandro Rodriguez shared the network's most remarkable capability. It could now develop its own ethical frameworks, balancing technological efficiency with human compassion. The network didn't just process information. It understood context, nuance, the complex interplay of human experience. "We're offering you a choice," Elena said to the Kraxan delegation. "Not submission, not conquest, but collaboration." The representative of the Kraxan collective struggled to comprehend what they were witnessing. Their entire civilization was built on the premise of technological superiority, of absolute control. Humanity had demonstrated something entirely different. That true intelligence is about adaptation, creativity, collective potential. The adaptive network began to translate and interpret the Kraxan's communication in real time. But more than translation, it was creating understanding, bridging not just language, but fundamental ways of perceiving existence. Kai explained the network's most profound capability. This isn't just technology, he said. This is a new way of being, of understanding, of existing. The Kraxan had a choice. They could continue their rigid approach, or they could learn, adapt, grow. Most chose integration. The global communication hub became a meeting point of civilizations, not through conquest, but through understanding. The adaptive network showed them possibilities they had never imagined, ways of solving problems, of understanding complexity, of existing together. Elena looked at the Kraxan representatives. "We're not interested in your technology," she said. "We're interested in what we can create together." As the discussions continued, the holographic display showed something remarkable. The network was already beginning to integrate Kraxan communication approaches, creating something entirely new. A hybrid form of intelligence that transcended individual civilizations. The attack that was meant to destroy humanity had instead triggered its greatest transformation. Sophia looked at Elena, a smile spreading across her face. "They thought they could control us," she said softly. "They had no idea what we could become." The adaptive network pulsed with possibility, with potential, with a future none of them could have imagined. And this was just the beginning.